Yeah, that Mac is a way better quality than my computer. I look real fuzzy. What the? Yes, baby. I'm on live, baby.
Black Power, y'all. We live.
Black Power. Welcome, welcome.
So we're going live a little early. As you know, last time we had some
So look
technical
at that.
difficulties, and we're just making sure that our audio is clear. We're making sure that we can be heard. Check on these. Let me know in the comments whether or not the audio is clear or the visuals. Let me know how we feeling, y'all.
Tech dude right there. Or I don't know if y'all can see it that way. Either way, this other guy.
We live.
Black Power. This is Chief Z, National Chief of the PEC Command, as well as Regional Chief of the Midwest Chapter. We out here co-hosting the Revolutionary Book Trap. I forget it's like duh, but I just say duh anyway. So the Revolutionary Book Trap. Yes, and we're about to get into this hot topic. Isn't that a store? Hot Topic.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's a store still. So yeah, y'all. Welcome to the Revolutionary Book Trap. Like we said, that's my co-host Z, and it's your boy Rob, Chief of Agitation and Propaganda. It's only fitting that I come here and try to facilitate this kind of like technical live, but also I'm happy to be here because this is actually one of my fucking favorite books ever.
And boy.
Yeah, I stand. So we're reading The War of the Flea, a classic study of guerrilla warfare. You know what I'm saying? A lot of communists be talking about people's protracted war, like people who like to call themselves Maoists. Understand that this war, this revolutionary war that we're fighting at this level right now, will intensify and eventually go into a kind of a people's war or whatever, but they don't have the strategy. So we're coming at you with these strategies as laid out by someone who was in counter revolutionary intelligence, like someone who dealt with this kind of stuff. And we are reviewing chapters 7 and 8. So make sure to get y'all hashtag read that backs ready. We finna go into it.
Black Power. Yeah. So chapter 7, Wars of National Liberation and Their Cost, the Irish Troubles and the Role of the Black and Tans, Terrorism in Israel, Rebellion in North Africa. Robert, not this one, starts off really going into depth about the conflict between England and Ireland, or the Irish, right? What was not yet established. And introduces this idea of terrorism. Why is my face looking all weird? Introduces this idea of terrorism as a strategic step towards, expelling colonial powers, and not to the extent of defeat of war, but to make it impossible financially, politically, for these colonial warmongers to maintain that colonial power. I want to really get into this idea of terrorism because we know in 2020 terrorism has a very different connotation than it did back in the day. My face just be like not wanting to do it, so that's fine. But yeah, so I'm gonna open that question up to you, Rob. I'm really curious. Given the connotation terrorism has today, what kind of takeaways can we have from the idea of terrorist or terrorism, um, that Robert Tabor posits in this book, in this chapter?
So first of all, I want to say, as Black Hammer, that we do not condone terrorism.
Yes, we don't.
First of all, second of all, terrorism, as we know it right now in like the political climate, is more of a condemnation um, of people fighting for liberation. Like, it doesn't matter what your tactics are. To the imperialist country, you will always be a terrorist because you are fighting for liberation. Whatever whatever escalation or point of escalation you are in the Revolutionary War, whether it is an armed struggle or even low intensity like how it is now. For example, the label that the CIA puts people who just don't want to see their people shot by police. They gave them the category of Black identity
The
extremist.
extremist.
Exactly right. So they categorize you as a terrorist. So that has um, it's been weaponized against us. You know what I'm saying? But Robert Tabor is using um, a more down to earth kind of a definition, because he uses it as a tactic that is supposed to incite terror. You're supposed to strike fear into your enemy. And if we use that definition, then the biggest terrorists are the United States of America and in their imperialist buddies.
Oh, for sure. Like they definitely got a monopoly on terrorism. I mean, that's how they primarily how they maintain control. We know man for man, they cannot just, engage the whole world in confrontation, in direct confrontation and on the ground battlefield confrontation. So they are strategic in terms of tactics that really just terrorize people. On page 98, Tabor posits the purpose of the War of National Liberation, etc., is to create an intolerable situation for the occupying power or its puppet government. And so that's been a theme throughout the book, but I think he brings it back again to this idea of like how is quote unquote urban terrorists utilizing this strategy of like targeting small things, small objectives consistently to ignite that type of intolerable situation. Um, and so we jump into that first with this England and Ireland. He puts the what is it, analogy of David and Goliath, right? England being Goliath, Irish the Irish being David. I think that's interesting though. I'm not one to typically have sympathy for, white people and white on white crime. I still don't. uh, but I do think that it does bring up the point of like how do you make right certain colonies intolerable for financial reasons, for political reasons, and there are some things that we can't take away from that. So um, he also says terrorism, conventionally viewed with pious horror as political murder, is far more humane, being more selective than most other types of warfare. Um, through terrorism and guerrilla warfare, rebellious colony becomes too great a political embarrassment to be sustained domestically or on the world stage, and two, unprofitable, too expensive, or no longer prestigious. So the Irish was embarrassing these niggas. They were just straight up embarrassing Britain because Europeans are savages. And so they went into Ireland and were just like literally terrorizing the population there, going around shooting guns, killing whoever they chose to, and were occupying force in that space. And when the Irish kind of took these small things to bring attention to that, Britain had to answer to the world. Like, y'all are supposed to be, right, prestigious. Y'all are supposed to be, quote unquote, like humane or whatever. And y'all out here raping and like killing people for no reason. And so, yes, I think that attention was brought forth by this like revolutionary, or I wouldn't even give it that much power, this rebellious initiatives on part of the Irish.
Black power. So yeah, I do have an appreciation for the IRA and them rebelling against their own oppressors, but I do think that it is 100% different than the kind of colonialism we face as people who are not from fucking Europe or up in there. But I do want the liberation of all people. You feel me? And I do think that there's a lot to learn from the Irish. Their struggle has been deep as fuck. And a lot of it has been reactionary, but a lot of it is something like fundamentally socialist, but not like anti-colonial all the way. So I get where your reservations are with that. But in studying their tactics, you know what I'm saying? I think it's really interesting that Robert Tabor like denotes that like the terrorism of the colonial state can never even compare. Because like there is no comparison between terrorism of like a handful of people trying to fight for liberation versus a armada of, you know what I'm saying, like colonizing ass motherfuckers going around the world, destroying, raping and pillaging, like you had said. So I 100% unite. And I do like this chapter because it goes into how the revolutionary goal, you know what I'm saying, in order to bring about revolution, we have to bring it to a stage where the masses of people who are oppressed, who are under the colonial boot, have to make it in an untenable situation. We as people have to become ungovernable. And Robert Tabor lays out all these tactics to make that so. You know what I mean? And when he says like the embarrassment, you know what I'm saying, that you impose onto the colonial powers, that is 100, because the whole world is watching you, right? The whole world, you tell the whole world that like you said, England is like supposed to be this this bringer of civilization. Oh, we sip tea and crumpets and shit, but really it's like it's not even a civilization. There's nothing civil about it. It's a barbarous civilization. It's a civilization based on barbarianism. You know what I mean? And when you expose that on the world stage, that affects them economically. You know what I'm saying? And when you affect them economically, it puts them at a disadvantage if you continue that struggle.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with this chapter with a lot of like mixed just conclusions, I guess. I mean, because when we look at the 60s, right, and we see these like Black organizations taking different approaches, but ultimately embarrassing, right, the United Snakes and how they have like responded to that. We don't see that same sympathy. I mean, it was difficult for the United States to govern with all of the uprising and like rebellions that were taking place through various organizations in the 60s. But ultimately, right, they handed down that shit. They handed that shit down with a heavy fucking hand and persisted to the point of concession on part of African people in this country. Um, right, and that concession was integration. So, huh?
Which is not a concession at all.
Yeah, no, I think that was, I still unite with the conclusion that integration was by far the worst thing that could have happened, that Black people could have united around. Of all the things to unite around, integration probably was the most detrimental, lasting effect. But I think the other difference was that, right, a lot of that came from, not a lot of that, but the position of Black people at the time was to appeal to their oppressors, right? Even more radical organizations took the approach of, self-defense rather than the offense, right? Which allowed the state to continue to terrorize and not be on the defensive. And I think that's a key point that Tabor continues to bring up, is that these revolutionary tactics puts the oppressors on the defensive. And that transition is really what shifts the control or power dynamic from what I've understood through the examples brought up, is that really shifts the power dynamic when you put these niggas on the defensive. And I think that was that was probably a missed opportunity then, because it was just so fucked up. Shit was so fucked up that we stayed on the defensive. Even revolutionary organizations, obviously it's not black and white, but predominantly put out a defensive, type of tactic. What do you think?
Black power. Oh, yeah. Y'all hear that? Black power. So yeah. Reading Mao and other revolutionaries who have gone into the guerrilla warfare stage of the revolution, they have there is a point of the strategic defensive. The strategic defensive is a kind of defensive formation.
Yes.
That will allow you to survive, but its purpose is to transition into the strategic offensive. You know what I'm saying? And what you had said before, like the concept of integration is to defang your revolutionary movement. So I 100% unite with that. And Comrade Valencia says that she agrees that integration was the worst thing that happened to Black people. My 70-year-old mother has said, 70-year-old mother has said this for years. Black power, Comrade Valencia. Really appreciate that.
We can have a whole book trap about just why integration was awful, and the lasting effects to this day. But yeah, like you said, strategic defensive, right? I think that Black people at the time had a level of trust, right? Which you had these counterinsurgency programs that entire organizations were completely unaware of, right? Whereas in these other countries, we see that there is an assumption, right, that there will be a counterinsurgency programs, or just don't trust these colonizers, right? There is a mentality of just like, nope, never, not at all. And I think that Black people thought, well, if we ain't doing shit wrong, then we have a leg to stand on. And as colonized people, we have to understand, in war, it doesn't matter if you're doing shit wrong, doing shit right, breaking fucking laws or not, you are targeted. And that, I think, also served to misguide or mislead those, guerrilla efforts by African colonized people at that time.
Yeah, we definitely cannot count on the sympathy of our oppressors. and it's a tried. It's not even that like it's not even like a super military stance. It's just a stance of like logic. It's been tried before and it didn't work. So
Yep.
definitely
Yep.
100% unite.
And then it was, I don't know. I'm not particularly interested in continuing to talk about white on white crime. Any other thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, I don't give a fuck about white on white crime. This is one of my favorite chapters, though. I have like a whole bunch of fucking hashtag read it backs about how, you know what I'm saying, like the political power, um, or the struggle really of the urban guerrilla or any sort of guerrilla is like the politicization or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Y'all get what I mean? Because like we're involved in that. You know what I'm saying? We're involved in that kind of struggle. So it makes me really happy to see what we're engaging in and like the science behind it. Like how okay, like for example, it says bombs and bullets are the physical weapons of the rural guerrilla. And
page.
Oh, page 98. It says bombs and bullets are the physical weapons of the rural guerrilla and equally the urban terrorists, like people who like go mad and enact these acts of terror. But the real lever for both is politics. You know what I'm saying? Like one is without politics, the other is 100% something that is politically astute and politically directed. You know what I'm saying? Another hashtag read that back will be the purpose of war and national liberation, pitting the feeble resources of a small and primitive nation against the strength of a great industrial power, is not to conquer or terrorize, but to create an intolerable situation for the occupying power or its puppet government. And that's on the same chapter. So that's right on. I think that these motherfuckers like Robert Tabor and shit like that, like they be saying the word primitive a lot too loosely. Like I know like Karl Marx and shit, but I don't understand our people as primitive. Like we're underdeveloped because of the colonial apparatus. But yeah, I get the point.
You know, on page 100, actually, I struggle initially with this, with the second paragraph. The purpose of terror, said Lenin, is to terrify. He might have strengthened the observation while weakening the aphorism by remarking that its greater purpose is to sabotage the orderly administration of government by forcing those who govern into defensive position in which nothing can be accomplished without the continual crippling presence of an armed guard. Its secondary effect, if not its purpose, is to induce counterterrorism that serves the rebel cause better than any stratagem the rebels themselves could devise. So the first part, yeah, I think that I struggled initially with this second part about the induction of counterterrorism, right? Because that typically happens on a civilian basis. Right? These governments hand out this violence indiscriminately, as mentioned before, to really suppress this insurgency population. And so we know that happens. I think that I struggle with that being an intentional like strategy, right? To bring about or to force the public into dialogue with the platform of the insurgency. You know what I'm saying?
So I think that we got to remember that early on in this book, it says that our natural, by our natural actions as revolutionaries, will be to induce a heightened response of counter-revolution. You get what I'm saying? But that heightened response of counter-revolution plays into the embarrassment that we were talking about others, because as they impose this like really ugly kind of like military occupation on our people. You know what I'm saying? They reveal themselves to be beasts.
Yep. It's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate that is the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
So think about like this whole relationship, this whole situation is unfortunate. You know what I'm saying? But
yes, it is.
We have to come to terms that like this like revolution is not going to be pretty. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We have to accept that as ugly as shit is right now, it's only going to get worse. But we cannot, as revolutionaries, let the state recede back into a friendly face.
Yep.
We cannot let it do that because that will instill inertia and you know what I'm saying, feelings of like, oh no, everything's okay within the general population. You know what I'm saying? Which is counterproductive to our goal of revolution.
And it's interesting because when I read that, I was like, oh, like you saying do some crazy shit so that the state can then do some crazier shit and like fuck us up. But like immediately after that, reading the next paragraph and further, there's an inevitability of that, right? The only way to avoid that is to not resist, right? The only way to avoid that is to, bend over.
Not even. I would say not even because
not even. You're right.
Exactly. If we as colonized people just live our daily lives, go to fucking the store and getting bread and shit, like we're still under this terrorism. Our children are still shot in the street. We are kidnapped. Our doors are kicked down. You know what I'm saying? Yep. The pigs be shooting our fucking dogs. Like there is no sort of a sort of state where there's only a taking of the state violence without any answer to that, or an answer to the state violence, which will naturally like escalate their violence, which in turns we have to fucking escalate.
True. Unity. What are the comments? Any comments we got? We got any questions?
There is some discussion. Cam is talking about ain't no fighting them whatsoever. So these elders are colonized and I was hurt. They're talking about the effect of integration.
That's certainly a hot topic. That is a store. I'm pretty sure it's a store.
Dude, that's not a store.
It is where I'm at, which you don't need to know.
But yeah, there's a discussion about integration. I'm wondering if anyone has any hashtag read that backs, throw them shits in there. Because if not, I'm going to keep going with mine.
Yeah. I'm going to start labeling that as hashtag read that back in mine. Because I just be like a whole bunch of notes like on the sides.
Oh, my shit is loaded up too. I'll be scribbling on my shit. Okay. So supplementary to what we were just fucking talking about, there's a quote here is like, the very efforts of a colonial power to end the struggle will only accelerate the process.
Yes.
Period. Robert Benny, Hot Topic is not a store.
Fuck off. Y'all ain't in the Midwest, so y'all. Anyways, yes. No, yes. And we see that with, the kind of United Snakes terrorism that took place in, Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq, just in the sense that like the United Snakes individuals in the United Snakes might not have had sympathy for those people, but it certainly riled up their population to be like, fuck the United Snakes. Like, we are absolutely anti, American and Western imperialism because of, that, like, I mean, so there was that presence, right? But I think, in the instance with, Britain and Ireland, there was that disgruntledness, but it was kind of just like meandering along. And then you had this like insertion of like, let us remember who the fuck these these people are. Let me show you as a revolutionary. Let me show you, and to show you, I'm going to poke the bear, right? So you can remember that it's a motherfucking bear.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it definitely served that purpose then, and we can see how it is effective even still today, right?
absolutely.
Give me some more examples.
Of like uprisings.
Of that like quote unquote terrorism that really shows the face of the true terrorists, right?
Well, like we said, um, people, the snakes will always identify our most beloved revolutionaries as terrorists. But to this day, um, Asada is still wanted by the United Snakes and like is held in Cuba, and allegedly she shot a pig. However,
Allegedly.
pigs shoot Africans all fucking day,
Allegedly.
every day, every
All the
fucking day.
time.
You go on Twitter, it's another fucking video. You know what I'm saying? And it's fucking disgusting. But um, they call her the terrorist, and then they on the world stage, you know what I'm saying? They have like this bounty on her head and shit like that, and these kind of like political. She's like a very politicized person. You know what I'm saying? Um,
So the more that they engage her, right, the more active that they are in trying to recover her or to target her, the more support she gets,
yeah,
right? The more people are forced to engage with the platform that she stands on. And uh he brings up this idea of like this martyrdom. When he on page 101, when he says the at this point the British made a fatal mistake. They proceeded to shoot 15 leaders of the Eastern Rebellion. The Eastern Rebellion was not successful. It was not successful, but you know, British the British decided to make an example of these, you know, rebels, and you know that quickly led to, right, more support, right, more. And I don't think that they planned. They obviously did not plan to get shot, right? They didn't plan to die that way. They didn't plan to set themselves up as martyrs. But again, when we reveal that the bear is a bear, it really unites the people, and even at the very least everybody begins to participate in that conversation, right, of like, who are these people, why is there a bear running a society of rabbits or what have you, I don't know, whatever the analogy is.
yeah. I can think of another example too. Actually, from where I was born in PR, there was a display of Puerto Rican nationalists at one point who wanted independence for their country, which is an anti-colonial movement inherently. You know what I'm saying? And they were like demonstrating with like with like wooden guns. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't have access to real guns, and there was a demonstration that they paid for, like to the mayor, to the governing body at that time, and when they did their demonstration, the police like circled them and just assassinated a whole bunch of people. It's called the Ponce Massacre, and that's where I'm from. I like walked the streets when I was like young as fuck. But
That sound like Move in Philly.
yes, yes,
Them niggas that them there wasn't no bullets in them guns. They ain't had no. They had guns, but it were literally for show.
yeah.
And obviously
Even if
they
they
bombed.
fucking had guns, it's 100%.
Yes, even if they did, but
It's
it was known by those pigs that those they you know weren't armed. They had been being terrorized by Philly pigs prior to that bombing.
yeah,
Of an entire, like a whole blocks. Um, kids and all. It was absolutely devastating. But yeah, I mean, right. And I think that certainly served at, and see, that's the difference, I think, is that when the state responds with violence or terror, it should be the objective of the revolutionary to continue to force force their hand. Because what happens is if we leave it on that, you get a lot of people coming out of that with like the fear. They just stick with the fear rather than an empowerment. You know what I'm saying? Rather than empowering the people to be like, no, y'all fucked up. Like, we about to do some shit about this. It's more of like, oh, see what they did to you see what they did to Move? You see what they did to Black Panthers? Like, they fucked them up. We can't do that shit no more. Like, you know.
You have to instill like a sense of revolutionary or national pride in people that like they're so disgusted by those events that people rise up against them. I would say that like once the Ponce massacre had happened in PR, whatever nationalist movement that was in PR at the time was definitely accelerated to a higher degree of revolutionary. You know what I'm saying? I think Move. I don't know if Move had a similar construct, but like Move, that whole time was a very revolutionary time. You know what I'm saying? Like revolution was in the air. But we definitely cannot be like we can't be moved into inaction by the violence of the colonial pigs, because that is their nature. That is the language that they speak. You know what I'm saying? And that example and your example, my example, we can come up with countless examples because it doesn't fucking matter. They're gonna do that type of shit anyway. So we might as well live that kind of speak that language, if you know what I'm saying?
Yep. And the one terrorist we ain't talked about is these white people. These white people terrorists, these terrorist white people, you know, and the fact that their terrorism does not incite that type of violence from the state.
Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't. You're absolutely right.
They can, you know, shoot up schools and have this very like obvious platform that they're operating from, like white nationalist platform that they're operating from, and then you won't see a counterinsurgency program.
No,
you won't see this type of, you know, they have militias all around the United States that are quite armed, quite out there in terms of the fact that they not only don't fuck with black people or brown people, they don't fuck with the fucking state. Like a good portion of them do not fuck with the state. And you see you see all these Netflix series, which I think is interesting, of all these white people and these crazy ass stories about the violence that they have committed on themselves, on each other, and on other people, and they talk about these people as like individuals, as separate from the platforms that ignited that violence in the first place. And so I don't know. I'm trying to like really assess what is the strategic purpose of that type of terrorism, other than to ignite terror in African and colonized people, or to just be known. I mean, I think it's like an egotistical thing a lot of times for these white people. It's just like, I feel angry, and so I'm gonna do something and be known. I want to be known, like the Unabomber, like.
That it has always been the nature of the United States and colonial settler colonies or whatever the fuck to have armed vanguard or not vanguards, armed vigilantes that can domesticate the population that they're settling on, the colonial population. So there's the state, there's the arms of the state, and then there's the civilian militias that function as an extension to the state. Yeah. So I don't think that, and more information is coming out about this. Like those people do not act as individuals. It's tied to a greater political agenda to get the United States government or whatever colonial government to be more aggressive to the colonial population. You know what I'm saying? Like people like Dylan Roof and people who like just go to Walmart and like shoot people and shit like that. There's evidence that those are tied to white nationalist agendas and structure,
Right.
organizational structure. And my understanding is that it is to incite a kind of race war right now, is to incite a reactionary violence from the colonial people to get a higher response by the colonial government. You know what I'm saying? To up repression. They're not their problems with the colonial government is not that they're oppressive. It's that they're not oppressive enough.
Got you. Got you. I mean, because that's what white nationalism is that this is our country, this is ours, and these niggers need to y'all ain't need a heavier hand and shit like that. I see that. I see what you're saying. So like, yeah, they not only are attached to these platforms, but there is strategy to it. And I think that obviously, you know, these mainstream media doesn't even speak to the platform that these individuals are operating from, let alone this like organization of tactic or strategy of like really inciting that. And a lot of that shit happens through pigs. I can see that strategy prime time with the way that, you know, pigs operate and organize themselves to incite a reactionary response from colonized people and the United Snakes, and then thus this extra reactionary response, or you know, more oppressive response from the colonial state. So yeah, I see that. I definitely, you know, we need to get organized, y'all. We need to be organized.
That being said, we are an organization of revolutionaries. We do practice self-defense and are not. We do not shy away from the reality of the violent nature of these kind of like civilians. We have our gun club. You know what I'm saying? We haven't been able to move it together because of the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? But we do have it online now, so people can be acquainted with these kind of ways to defend yourself. We're doing these political, you know what I'm saying, not teachings but discussions. We're in dialogue with our people, trying to raise the level of political consciousness. You know what I'm saying? So we ourselves are when we look at when we look at the movement in PR, when we look at the Panthers and shit like that, like we know that they're repressed or whatever. We aim to be the next stage in that revolutionary battle. We fully intend and are taking the torch from that battle. So this is part of that process. So when we say get organized, we mean join Black Hammer. We're out here doing the work. We got the science. You know what I'm saying? So hit up our website, blackhammer.org/sign-up.
Black Power, definitely the plug right here. I want to move on to the question of Palestine and the discussion that Robert Tabor brings to the creation of Israel, right, through the UN, United Nations. This take on the creation of Israel, I think, is one of contention. Perhaps I'm gonna let you take the floor. How you feel about that? I'm gonna let you start this conversation, because I think that I am still reflecting on the information in this chapter.
So,
page 107.
So in terms of Israel, I don't know what point of contention you're referring to, but my understanding of the inception of Israel is that it is the extension of the colonial powers. It's like the newest extension, or one of the newest like military satellites for a economic foothold in that area.
Yes.
A lot of people are under the impression that it was created as a way to pay like reparations in a way to the Jewish people after what had happened in World War II.
Right.
That is false because Palestine did not have anything to do with their oppression. So why would they be the ones to pay? If anything, y'all should have made like the state of Israel in fucking Germany. But yeah, like its inception was before all that. The UK already had its foothold in that area. It just not relinquished power, but like had a so-called like Jewish representation in there, so it can be like, no, this is the place for Jewish people.
Yeah. So post World War II, or coming towards the end of World War II, Jewish people in Palestine were done with like British control. They were trying to resist, British occupation of Palestine and establish what some level of independence. And as well as the fact that coming off the genocide of like of these millions of Jewish people in Europe, they were like, it's fucked up that like y'all are shutting down y'all borders to these refugees. That's fucked up, blah blah blah. And so it says 109 British, but there's no doubt that the deed was one of the great irritations, the great harassments, which so annoyed and confused and bedeviled the British that ultimately they gave the problem over to the United Nations and thus opened the door to the partition of Palestine and the first Jewish state in 2,000 years. So, right, again, you have these external forces making borders in a country or a region or a place that they ultimately have no stake in, right? The United Nations was not made up of Palestinians. It was not made up of Palestinians that were Jewish or Muslim or what have you. It was Europeans being like, all right, y'all be fighting and shit. Let us da 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 da. And I think right in that breath, it was easier for Britain to, especially after World War II, broke his shit, fucked up his shit, economy and shit. They don't have time to deal with this shit. And so they're like, United Nations, figure this shit out, right? And they took that as an opportunity to make that an extension of, right, this like European colonization, a like war, an extension of that like armed force, extension of that military power, and has been developing, right, Palestine, occupied Palestine, as that under the guise of Israel, right? And then the Zionists, who advocated for that independence, for that partition, for that claiming of land, have only further united with these Western powers, to the point of inducing and engaging in genocide of Palestinians, right? So I think it's an interesting take in that, in this take, Robert Tabor kind of like, he's just telling the story. He's just telling the facts. And I think that, even with the facts of like, yeah, like you had this population of Jewish people in Palestine who were fighting for their independence, coming from this like deep-seated like ancestral rage of all of this violence that had been handed down by these fucking white people, by the way, these Europeans, right? Not Palestinians, not like, there was no mention of like, Palestinians engaging in like a civil war. It was not a civil war. It was this external force. And so how that transitioned into what we see today, where we have the occupation of Palestine by Israel, right? On a very like violent and genocidal method, right? And I think that's because we see the integration of like white European Jews into like this Western monopoly of the world.
Um, I would say that, like you said, coming out of World War II and economic depravity in the European, you know what I'm saying, the European nations, we've always known that when Europe is in a state of economic disarray, which we learned in how Europe underdeveloped Africa in previous installments of the Revolutionary Book Trap, we know that the only way that they know how to alleviate themselves of that is further colonialism, like imperializing um, other cultures. So I think Israel is really no different than that. And I think that Robert Tabor is moving on a white nationalist sentiment where it could be factual that there were disgruntled Jewish people in Palestine or whatever, but I think that that speaks more to the nefarious nature of the white nationalist state, where they concede disgruntled sectors of their population with colonial plunder. That's how like they were pretty much integrated into whiteness. You know what I'm saying? By they're pretty much jumped in. You know what I'm saying? Like after they got their fucking ass beat.
It's like, all right, bet.
Yeah.
You earn this. You earn this in our eyes. Yeah, that's some bullshit. That's some bullshit. I think that is like a pretty good summation of that. Like disgruntled or not, right? It wasn't just that small. It wasn't just that disgruntled population. After the creation of Israel, we had this influx of Jewish, European descended Jewish people into that place, right? Which is created.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I do want to say that since its inception, Israel was not something that was very popular with Jewish people in general. You know what I'm saying? There were lots of representatives of the Jewish population that that did not unite with the colonization of Palestine until this day. You know what I'm saying? Like there are Jewish people that disunite with that kind of struggle. So I understand that Israel proclaims itself to be the state for Jewish people, and it has that kind of connotation to the point that if you criticize Israel, you're known as an anti-Semite, which I do not unite with at all. If you are a quote unquote anti-Semite, you would also be against the Palestinian people because they too are Semitic people.
Yep.
So yeah.
I just saw a comment, somebody impressed about me, sniffling and shit. Whatever, I'm still in isolation. Fuck off. Yeah, no. I wrote this article coming out of some tension from a professor of mine, actually. I won't say her name because she went into hiding. But the article, essentially, she was like very much like challenging Zionism, challenging, the occupation of Palestine, bringing in other professors who spoke to that, who and she wasn't tenured. So what happened was that a lot of Jewish people, or not even Jewish people, Zionists, were very anti her. They went through her public Facebook post and like really charged her with being anti-Semitic. And the article that I wrote was just that, claiming that somebody who is anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist is somehow anti-Semitic is really creating this dialogue that Jewish people are out here trying to fucking murder and kill and like harm people. That's not Jewish people. That's Zionism, right? Zionism, this idea that like y'all could just come up in here and take this shit because you wanted it. You can claim it as yours because you have European like backing of that. And it is in our solidarity in the past and in the present that we really fight that anti-Semitism through our unity, right? Unity not only with like other African and colonized people, but with Palestinians, right? Because as you have said, there are quite a bit of like Black, brown, African, what have you, Jewish people in occupied Palestine who are also suffering from the violence of this Zionist state, of this European colonial power. And right, so
100%. Palestinian people are colonized people, who, like all colonized people, deserve liberation from the colonial state.
Facts. Facts.
Serious.
So I want to go to page 112 because I think we get into this idea of like, well, I began to think about like neo-colonial, the transition from a colony to a neo-colony, if that makes sense. Terrorism was more effective than guerrilla tactics in Morocco. True guerrilla campaign never developed, although a few hundred raiders from Spanish Morocco began such a campaign and tied up a division of foreign legionnaires in Spahis, I can't say the word, what's that word? In the mountains of the Rift for some weeks during the autumn of 1955. The struggle ended in the capitulation of the French government through a series of compromises. The announcement that the Sultan bin Yosef would be permitted to leave his exile in Madagascar for Paris created a jubilant demonstrations in Morocco that forced greater concession. He wouldn't return to rebut the departure of the aged pretender bin Arafah set off new demonstrations. The actual return of the Sultan brought the entire Muslim population into the streets, and 50-year-old protectorate became a hollow pretense, which Paris hastily abandoned. And so I think we can see, like, this is building the stage of like, when we make these concessions or compromises, that means that we are really not exchanging power. You know, I don't think that power is being exchanged in that sense. I think that it is like a parent who has a child who is having a tantrum, and that parent is like, all right, bet, you know, I'll let you have this thing that you want. But ultimately that parent is still the parent, is still the controller of that, and makes this concession for their convenience rather than to exchange of power. Like, all right, you can start making decisions about what you want to eat for dinner. You know what I'm saying? And so it goes on to say the formula followed by Istiklal was simple. Terror and sabotage served the twofold purpose of taking the profit out of colonialism and making the country unsafe for colonists. Under political pressure at home, I'm skipping some lines. Since a colony cannot be controlled, it is of no value and of great expense. The purpose of occupying it as a colony ceased to exist. And Paris, under political pressure at home, wisely accepted a settlement with an essentially conservative independence movement that preserved major French interests in the country. Right. And this is in he wrote this in 1965, and we see the exponential increase in neo colonies today, right? That's like not a occupation of this country. We see this in the form of puppet governments. We see this in the form of the World Bank and increasing the debts of these countries in order to force them to have these like Western corporations really occupying and having ownership of their fucking resources. And so ultimately these independent countries are still being, and so that's one thing I value about Cuba. Cuba also, like, when in the revolution, they pushed out these corporations, not just these government forces. It was like, nah, we taking this power back. And I think that goes back to the material conditions. It's like, it ain't just about how you are treating us as people. It is also about the people having control over their resources. And so you eliminate that opportunity for this neo colony to take place. Okay, I was done. Go ahead.
That is 100% Z. I unite with that assessment. I think that Robert Tabor is out of his depth for this assessment. Like, I'm sure he wasn't reading motherfucking Kwame Nkrumah, who assessed or enunciated this phenomenon of neocolonialism. But like I said before, I do think that even though these rebellions did not go all the way through as a revolution in terms of people gaining power over their resources. That is because the tactic of neocolonialism. So the initial attack, the initial rebellions, forced the colonial people to shift their tactic. You know what I'm saying? In furthering the oppression, in the shape of the neo-colonial situation where you're economically still in charge, or and you have a puppet dictator and things like that. That is effective. That was effective in quelling the revolutionary fervor in that time. So that is why they failed. However, I do maintain that this is still a escalation of the revolutionary trajectory in the full analysis. Like so we had, just to bring it on home, we had George Bush as a fucking president. And I don't know if y'all remember when he was young, but like motherfuckers, nobody who I ever talked to fucked with George Bush. You know what I'm saying? No colonized person, not my motherfucking uncle, not my fucking cousin. No one was fucking with him. Everybody knew he was bullshit. Motherfuckers were taken to the streets against the war of Iraq and shit like that. So naturally, the colonial state had to devise a neo-colonial figure in the form of Obama. You know what I'm saying? Which did quell the revolutionary fervor amongst the people. Because if they didn't do that, we probably would have escalated into a more like revolutionary formation like earlier on. You know what I'm saying? Like where we're at right now, where people like really taken to the streets and shit like that, like it might have happened then. And if they didn't have a Obama to quell the people, you know what I'm saying? And this phenomenon can be observed in all the colonial states, your colonial governments or whatever, where they have a representative of the colonial state, but that looks like the people that they're oppressing, right? And who economically maintains the colonial situation or the status quo. And I would say that even right now, like as things get like even hotter as they are right now, we're in a motherfucking pandemic. Motherfuckers are exposing the government for what it is. That's why they have someone like Bernard Sanders or whatever. Well, it's not necessarily like a neo-colonial question because it's more to quell like the quote unquote like socialist talk that is going on. You know what I'm saying? But the not the just disingenuous, but like they trying to pull the wool over your eyes. You feel me? They trying to like fuck with you with like putting someone forth who like speaks in socialist rhetoric or whatever, but serves the neo-colonial or the colonial state.
Sounds like your cat fucks with it.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah, no, Obama definitely served as that. I mean, this nigga was able to accomplish so much violence under his goddamn 8 years with like little to no backlash, minimal backlash. I mean, that was because he walked and talked like a smooth motherfucker. Like I cannot. I mean, right? It was just like just the way that I mean, I think he practiced talking that way. Certainly.
No,
like not only did he follow a script like these other presidents, but like he had to be like super, super personable. And that was his job. As the president of the United States, his job was to be able to execute this level of violence, you know, nationally and internationally, and keep the populace relatively quiet. They can't. It's difficult for any country to fight on multiple fronts, and the things that he was accomplishing during his presidency certainly would not have been accessible to him had he been fighting a war on American soil. And we see that happening, you know, having happened before. They will make concessions if they are put in the situation of having to fight multiple fronts. and we see Trump as like kind of serving in a different way. I think he serves as a distraction, right? These things are still taking place, but we so focused on the reality TV show that is Trump that these violences are here and then gone, right? The fact that he can deal with the pandemic the way that he is dealing with it is like mind blowing. It's mind blowing, and so yeah, I definitely think that speaks to the neo colony, right? Of just like it doesn't have to be through occupation. It has to be through these like just the type of movements and different types of strategies that really pull the wool over people's eyes. And whether that's because so that they don't have to use force, they could just like be like, look over there, what's happening that way, and they fucking shit up over there. And so that's Trump. Trump serves in a very similar way. He's a fucking clown. Wait, this is definitely recorded, so yeah, fuck you. Anyways, yeah. So Robert Tabor, I think he does lack that perspective, but like you said, I think that is like it is essential. I think any reduction of like direct violence gives the people an opportunity to build a better revolutionary front. I think, not that we endorse this shit at all, because we don't, but in the United States, we have opportunity, right? We can have these types of conversations. We can have these types of conversations. We can really move about um strategically in our areas, in our zones, in our spaces, and you know that is to our advantage. That is to our advantage as colonized people, that we are not under such military occupation as expressed in before, right? As expressed in before, right? As it was in Morocco, as it was in Ireland, prior to the expulsion of these neo-colonial forces, or these colonial forces. But neo-colonialism is not the end goal, as we can see, right? The people still suffer under neo-colonialism. We still have no control of our resources, right? And that is ultimately, right, the goal of revolution. So I unite with that, Rob. I think that is a step. A step.
Yeah. Because we have to look at like even now that neo-colonial tactic is not working anymore. People are seeing through that bullshit. Through time, we now have the assessment to assess that neo-colonial situation and be like, we don't want that. But I also disunite that we're in a better position because we're less repressed. I would say that we are more repressed than ever, just in a way that makes people docile. But like the violence is still there. You know what I'm saying? Like if I believe that situations like make the person. You know what I'm saying? So and we will, and that's just the reality of it. When the state reverts back to the pure colonial violent machine, as opposed to a neo-colonial, there will be people who are born in that fire, because it is a fire. When they're born in there, that will be the revolution, the revolutionary, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
a person built of rebellion. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that we're fortunate to have these like avenues of communication. I would say that if we didn't have these fucking avenues of communication given by the colonial state, we would make them ourselves, because we have that fucking potential. This kind of like comfortable place that we have, as opposed to our brothers and sisters in Africa, you know what I'm saying? Like, or the Caribbean, or in South America, you know what I'm saying? Like, it makes us, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say all of us, but a general like liberal population docile.
Yeah.
Revolutionaries,
No,
no.
I unite with that. I unite with that, Rob. I mean, I don't think that I think condition wise, right, the conditions that we are experiencing have not shifted. I stand by that. I think that, right, like people say, oh, we're 400 years out of slavery. We ain't 400 years out of slavery, but anyways, right, we it's better now, and certainly there is a fallacy to that, right, in terms of just numbers, statistically, in terms of violence handed down by the state, it is worse. It
Yeah.
is certainly worse, and there is a creation of this like docility because we have this happy face government, right? It's like, oh, we're all the same, the melting pot. We all are Americans. Y'all are citizens, but y'all ain't. Y'all ain't really citizens. Y'all colonized, nigga. Y'all are colonized. Y'all are still colonized, and like drilling that into the minds of people in the United States is like super significant, super like a central role of like revolutionaries in this country. Just for that reason, for the purpose of like when they do and they will return to that direct colonial violence, which is what is happening, right? Especially in some spaces, it is just how it is. The occupation, it is up to us to right poke the bear. I think that goes back to the beginning of like, let us remind the people that the same people who are terrorizing us in our neighborhoods, the same fucking, Walmart and whatever that waste all this fucking food while niggas is starving, all these fucking landlords that got all these empty houses while niggas is homeless and freezing to death. I'm in the Midwest, so niggas freezing to death and shit like that. Like, that's the fucking state. If this government is not set out to eliminate the suffering of the people of their citizenry, then it is not your government. It is not your government, right? That is the only sole purpose of any governing body. It should be to protect the interests of the people that they serve. And so I think we could separate. I think as a neo colony, we could separate. You know, the masses generally separate this like occupation because that's what it is, right? The police state is the occupation of our hoods from the government, from this like idea that like well, we just need to reform the police because the police are bad. No, the police are an extension of this government. They are putting out the interest, they are vested interest in this government, right? And so I think that creates that like sleepness, right? Like niggas is sleep. Like, you mad at the pigs, but you need to understand that they are right, that they are a arm of this colonial violence, right? That is still very much a colonial violence, right?
Yeah, 100%.
This is a little town in the city that I live in, and I started working there at a restaurant. And people every time I see a black person there, they're like, "Oh, do you feel safe down there?" Back in the day, they ain't want black people up in here. Back in the day, these people were like 30. This was like a few years ago. Like, and yeah, like I see like white people enjoy the presence of police in that area, right? You're not occupied by it or threatened by it. This old white lady was driving her car all types of crazy on the wrong side of the road. She looked confused, like she didn't know where she was going. And like, sure, that happens. But like, if my black ass was doing that, I would be terrified if I saw a police officer. Like, oh fuck, I'm about to get a ticket, and I was just trying to find my way and make an. But she was just like, "Oh, hey, police, I need your help." She literally waved this nigga down, and so that is like a pretty prime example of like we are occupied as African and colonized people, and that is not the experience of everybody, right? That has to do with wealth and class, but that also has to do with race or what have you. But yeah, that's chapter 7. You didn't even get into chapter 8. That shit got me hot. I'm like sweating. Chapter 8, General Grievous on guerrilla war in Cyprus, the political uses of terrorism and errors of British strategy. This chapter to me was a little dense in terms of information handed out, but it does draw us back to, again, this idea From the start, he saw. I'm on page 121. From the start, he saw very clearly that his victory would be political rather than military. I mean, you can't drive that point home any more than Robert Tabor does in this book. It's just like all of these different examples of revolutionary tactics still puts forth that the politicizing the people is the ultimate goal, right? If you don't have the support of the masses politically, then whatever revolutionary strategy you put forth it ain't revolutionary strategy. It's just ain't, right? He's not referencing people who didn't put that political agenda first. He's only referencing revolutionaries who have done that and the successes that they have seen because of that strategy. Um, and also this like guerrilla tactic of like these small sabotages of the government and the police state, which we were just talking about the police state.
Yeah.
Page 122, or the procedure. Activity will be aimed at causing so much confusion and damage in the ranks of the British forces as to make it manifest abroad that they are no longer in complete control of the situation. The campaign will be carried out in 3 fronts: sabotage against government installations and military posts, attacks on British forces by a considerable number of armed fighting groups, and 3, organization of passive resistance by the population. I want to hear your thoughts on like what that means and like what that third objective. I think we talked about the first two quite a bit.
Yeah, I think there's a quote that I had put down from a while ago. I'm not finding it. I could have sworn it was in this chapter though. But yeah, passive. I believe the quote had to do with criminality and how criminality is subconsciously is a form of rebellion, like whether people know it or not. That
Yes.
The criminal has like the highest revolutionary potential. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Criminality.
exactly. So in my mind, that's what that means. That like you expose the state so much for their bullshit that even people who aren't necessarily politicized as revolutionary still say fuck the state. And I
Fuck the
definitely
state.
think uh, that that's relevant in colonized populations like Africans in America. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't need to read fucking Robert Tabor, dude. They're still like fuck the police, break the law. You know what I'm saying?
Because the law don't serve them, right?
Exactly. So our role as revolutionaries is to politicize that in a way where we can target that rebellion into the revolutionary objective, as opposed to self-serving individualism. You know what I'm saying? Like criminality that leads to self-serving individualism transformed into criminality. We don't condone criminality, y'all. We don't condone it. But yeah, criminality that serves to further the political agenda. And that's what I think that he means by like general rebellion, like passive rebellion by the general populace. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be that the whole population takes up arms against the state. It's going to be a vanguard group, you know what I'm saying, who will take on the state, you know what I'm saying, might cut some losses, but once they have the losses, they have a pool of revolutionary, generally disgruntled people to recruit from. You know what I'm saying? They have a pool of people to, you know what I'm saying? Like if we gonna be in the trenches or whatever, and the people really fuck with us, we gonna go. This person will like hide us or cook some food. You know what I'm saying? Be like, I don't know. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. You know what I'm saying?
Underground railroad. Facts.
Exactly.
So
that's what I think he means by that.
Yeah, that quote that you're talking about on page 109, Uh, so, but criminality itself is a form of unconscious social protest, reflecting the distortions of an imperfect society. And in a revolutionary situation, the criminal, the psychopath, may become as good a revolution as the idealist. And so there's a like possibility for that. And I think as revolutionaries, we know that shit don't just happen, right? Shit don't just happen, right? There has to be intention behind it as well as a reflection of the material conditions. So like Rob, like you said, like understanding there is a production of this like criminality out of the material conditions, and it is up to the revolutionary or the revolution. It is up to the revolutionary to create a revolutionary environment to politicize that criminality, right? To take that shit like, yeah, you stealing because you fucking hungry. Let us not steal from our neighbor. Let us steal from these hypothetically. Let us steal from these corporations, right? Let us not, enact this like horizontal violence because of the violence that we experience, right? Let us
Go vertical.
vertical
violence.
You know what I'm saying? I don't even know what that means, but that don't mean horizontal. That means stay away from, don't be out here fucking up your people because you got fucked up by the police.
Exactly. That's what that means. Like horizontal is attacks on people who are in the same place as you. Horizontal. Vertical violence would mean attacks on people who have a hierarchy on you, like your oppressor.
Yeah, I don't want to say all that, but yes.
Allegedly. Just
there
about
was a subversion to that, but absolutely, and it is not even about condoning or not condoning criminality. Criminality is a fact.
Mm-hmm. Also, no, go ahead, comment.
No, especially in the United States, right? And why is that, right?
Yeah, so I want to say that criminality, we don't think of, when we say criminality, I'm not imagining something on a moral grounds. We mean the colonial law. So right. Colonial law is illegitimate. It's based on an oppressive structure. Their laws are meant to sustain the status quo and ultimately repress colonized people. So we don't see their law as legitimate. If a revolutionary calls someone a criminal, it is because they are committing crimes against the people.
Yep.
Our laws are different than their laws. So when we say criminal, we mean someone who is rebellious against their laws. Their fucking structures, and those are the people who have a lot of revolutionary potential, and we could see it in real life.
Yeah, I was about to say, let us be plain, right? After Hurricane Katrina, all these people were demonized and criminalized as like looting, right? That was a criminal activity, right? And the focus was on criminalizing these individuals who really were not morally wrong. If you're hungry, you need to eat, and you are not stealing from anybody. You are simply taking the resources that are available to you and your people, as well as like these made up fucking borders that the United States and these other imperialist powers continue to enforce and drive in. Is that like you are criminal by crossing this imaginary line, right? You are criminalized by crossing this imaginary line. For no other reason. It's not based on any type of moral dilemma or what have you. It is simply because these are neo-colonial powers or colonial powers trying to maintain that power through the separation of land and the division of land. So I mean, right? And it even goes down to the parent or the mother who is struggling to feed her child and shoplifts, right? That is criminalized. But really, where's the harm? Who is harmed by that, right? Who is harmed by that? And I think the difference between what us as revolutionaries identify as criminal versus what these colonial powers identify as criminal is that we base that criminality on harm that is done to the people, really like actual tangible people, not, you know, oh, like you over here downloading videos, and therefore that person who made that movie ain't getting your $2.50. But there was no harm done, right? You know, there was no harm done. There was no violence done. It is not criminal. It is not. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. They want to pose their corporations as people, like people who have
Liberal.
rights. Exactly, but that's ridiculous. So that's who you pose the threat to, is the economic organization of the corporation, and that corporation serves to fund or monetize the state and have this apparatus over you. In
Got any
conclusion,
questions?
fuck them.
We got any questions in the comments?
We have some laugh emojis. Rye says, y'all have a great dynamic for the book trap. Right on. There's somebody roasting your ass for being sniffly.
I saw that. Well, my partner was like, look, and brought me some tissue because, you know, somebody was roasting my ass for being sniffly. Like, fuck off.
So Gallo says, day one, fuck the state. Okay. Diva says, illegitimate as fuck. Already know that's our comrades jumping in. But yeah, I'm not seeing no hashtag read that backs or anything like that, which disappoints me, but it's all goody.
We're bringing the info to them. I do want to really quickly
say, my fault. Olivia does say white are vigilantes, colonized people are terrorists. Period.
Facts.
Period.
Facts. Yep. And you briefly touched on this, and I think it's worth defining before we close out by 12:30. Is what neoliberalism is, right? Liberalism is this like individualist idea of like your own personal needs are supersede those of the collective. Neoliberalism is giving that same freedom or what have you, identity to these corporations, right? By saying like, yeah, like you are harming Amazon. Like the fuck?
So
What you mean? Wait a minute. Amazon has a right to what the hell kind of bullshit is that? That's neoliberalism. That is like this induction that like these corporations have a say so. They have a say so. They are bodies, they are entities, they have rights and what have you that are protected by the state. But yeah, we do have a great dynamic.
Right on.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah. But yeah, neoliberalism fucking sucks, and we've been under that shit for so long. And all our people are rising all over the world. Like Haiti is rising up against their neo-colonial government. Chile, you know what I'm saying? And we definitely got to join their ranks in, you know what I'm saying, like rising up against the state, which we're doing in our kind of way. In their kind of way, probably very soon, but we'll see with all this like pandemic shit. But yeah, is there anything else in chapter 8 did you want to go over? Or if you could categorize chapter 8 in like a main thesis thing, because like this one was, it's like you said, it's like a lot of heavy, not heavy, but like dense stuff, specifically about like British strategy or whatever. And once something is centered on colonized nations like the British, like I do kind of get like uninterested. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it brings us back to just the idea of terrorism being an intensive political agitation, and that it cannot be like one strike is all right. That's that vigilante shit. Terrorism handed down by revolutionaries is continued, and the strategy is to gain political support. Um, and you know these colonial powers really cannot compete with that, and that is evident in this chapter. That whatever strategies they employ to suppress that type of insurgency, it only serves to put forth more people into that insurgency, to gain more support for that insurgency. And so yeah, fuck the state. For the people, fuck the state. Anyways, yes. So next week, y'all, we gonna finish this book out, because why not? We got 3 chapters left, and I know we've been doing 2, but if we do 2, then we'll have to do 1 by itself. So we are going to do chapter 9, 10, and 11, which will close us out. And then I got an interesting announcement for y'all next week, so I suggest coming back, because we about to start this. We're not just gonna drop another book, but a book trap. We're gonna drop a book series, right? We're gonna lead y'all on a journey that's gonna really enlighten y'all and allow y'all to enlighten the people as revolutionaries. You're gonna be able to walk them through. So I'm gonna drop that. We're gonna drop that next week. That book series will be available. So you gotta show up if you want the first grabs on it. Just kidding. It's more than enough. But yes, chapters 9, 10, and 11, the revolutionary book trap closes out. Rob, close out.
Black Power, y'all. Thank you so much for being with us as we discuss this very, very poignant kind of like guerrilla warfare strategy book, War of the Flea, by Robert Tabor. I want to appreciate y'all in the comments. You know what I'm saying? Diva talking about me and my hands. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe my hands will be here next week. We'll see. But yeah, Black Power salute to all of y'all. Check us on next time.
Peace.